All right, students, so let's go ahead and just do a basic lecture on the outcomes of Lesson 7, Controlling Access to Local Hardware and Applications. Again, this is pretty important from a security standpoint. We're focusing on security inside of our organization. Essentially, keep users from using hardware that we don't want them to use. For example, perhaps we'll talk about the ability to set restrictions so that users can use the optical drive in the computer for maybe reading optical drives, but not for writing them, as an example. And then we'll look at, how to secure applications. We only want users to be able to run and use applications that we approve in our organization. So that becomes pretty important that we do that from a security standpoint. So we'll go ahead and just jump into configuring hardware restrictions. So device installation. Again, because we're focusing not just on the local computer, but on an enterprise, we would do this through GPO, through group policy objects, and through the ability essentially to use group policy to define what users can and cannot install. So you can see here, they give you the path configuration policy. So if we open up the group policy management console, here's an example of it. We can see that we can do things like, allow administrators to overwrite device installation restriction policies if we put into place, prevent installation of devices not described, by other policy settings. So there's just a ton of ways for us to do that. And in a subsequent video, I'll go ahead and demonstrate this for you. So controlling removable storage. Again, in group policy, we want to go ahead and control removable storage. We have some options here, so we can go into the removable storage access folder. Here's an example here. So notice I was talking about, CD and DVD, so we can deny write access, for example. So by denying write access, by configuring the deny write access, we essentially take away the computer's ability for a user to put in a writable CD, for example, and copy data that we don't want them to take off of our network. So configuring application restrictions. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a basic Active Directory environment. I'll also give you the videos on how to do that yourself. It can be pretty important to understand and play with this stuff, practice this stuff outside of just simply doing the MOAC labs. So software restriction policies, again, group policy settings that enable administrators to specify programs that are allowed to run on workstations by creating rules of various types. Now, what we're going to see is there's actually a new feature and functionality available on Enterprise Edition as of Windows 7, Enterprise Edition, Ultimate Edition, called App Locker. And that tends to be a better way to do it, and we'll see why. So here, what we're doing is we're specifying restrictions by the application, and we can do that in 4 ways. So through certificate rules, through a hash rule, so figuring out a hash based on, say, the executable file or a file that's used, network zone rules, and then, of course, path rules. And path rules simply says, okay, we can go in and say, here is a path to a corporate share. Any software executable that's in this share, we're going to go ahead and allow someone to run. So if they're trying to run or execute software that's not within a particular path, they're not going to be able to do that. So creating rules, well, pretty simple. We go into the GPO. You'll find the GPO there on Windows settings. Now realize that, as we'll see, there's 2 ways to do this. So one is to go into the Windows settings. So we're talking about the computer configuration portion of group policy management. Right click, go to the software restrictions and run that. So you create new rules of your own in additional rules folder using the dialog box that we'll see. So here it is, creating rules. We're in software restriction policies. We've got some real basic templates here, and we can go in and create rules. Now, as we do this, realize that we can search the web, okay, and perhaps find configuration for rules for standard programs. So we don't have to necessarily figure all this stuff out ourselves. The web is a great place to do this. However, remember that you want to test all of this. Test it in a test environment. So rule settings. So 3 possible settings are disallow, so prevents an application matching a rule from running. Basic user allows all applications not requiring administrative privileges to run. So, that would be, in today's environment, it used to be if there was a program that needed administrative functionality, you had to give the user administrative functionality for the whole computer, in which case you were opening up your network to risk. Here, what we're talking about, is basically saying, okay, if they don't need administrative privileges, go ahead and run it. Unrestricted allows an application matching a rule to run. So again, we have to define each and every application. Well, here with App Locker, that gets changed. Okay, so App Locker, application control policies, it's essentially the old group policy in a better way, easier to manage through rules, through a wizard-based thing, so we can go in, and it uses rules. Administrators, yes, must manage that. It makes perfect sense. Rule types. So in App Locker, okay, again, if you notice, it's in the group policy configuration, App Locker container. We can create executable rules, Windows installer rules, so script rules, and packaged app rules. So packaged app rules may be a rule for, say, running a service pack. Are we going to allow someone to run a service pack? Now, understand, normally service packs we should be installing, managing through Windows Software Update services or something like that. But the cool thing about this is what changes is now suddenly all applications are blocked, and we have to create rules instead of for blocking applications. If you think about that, that could be extensive, blocking applications that people want to run. Here, by default, we're blocking, and now what we're doing is allowing or creating rules that allow applications to run. So it makes perfect sense that we're going to have fewer applications that we allow our users to run than we are needing to manage all these applications that people find all over the web that, adds little emoticons to their Outlook, for example, and adds bloatware to our system. So understanding rules. By the way, YouTube, a great place to go. You want to understand a little bit more about App Locker. You'll find a ton of stuff out at YouTube. So App Locker, it creates rules that enable users to access the files needed for Windows and the system installation applications to run. It's the simplest way to do this is to right-click each of the 3 rules containers and select, create default rule from the context menu. So it has some default rules built in. Here they are, allow everyone rule. So all files located in the programs folder, for example, all files in the Windows folder. So if those files are in those folders, they're going to be able to execute them. We can create rules automatically. So you right-click one of the 3 rules containers, create rules automatically. You specify the folder to be analyzed, and users or groups, in which the rules should apply. Now, again, remember, through group policy, we're going to define what users and groups have access to specific folders. So automatically, the idea is these rules are going to apply to those groups that have access to folders. So we certainly, in that environment of creating a network share for applications, we're going to make that more granular by creating subfolders, say for departments, so that users in the accounting department aren't going to be able to run and execute software that the engineers need. And also, this works well, of course, for managing that most important thing, which is our licenses, making sure that we have enough licenses, that we're legal and ethical when it comes to licensing. So you specify the folder to be analyzed and the users or groups to which the folder should apply. So again, it gets more granular. Rule preference page appears. The wizard then displays a summary of its results in the review page and adds the rules to the container. So again, it's sort of that set it and forget it thing. Now the problem that I've run into with this idea of creating rules automatically is, are those the rules that I want to employ and to who? But if you notice with the wizard here, it becomes pretty simple to say, okay, user security group that this rule will apply to. Okay, so clearly we need Active Directory to do this. We've created the group or rule, the folder that contains the files to be analyzed, and the name to identify the set of rules. So here they just have program files. We need to be more specific, as you could understand, if we're applying it to a specific group. So, create publisher rules, file hash rules are created by using a file's hash. So if you're not familiar with what a hash is basically we, run that set of ones and zeros in perfect order that makes up a file, and we get a hash code. The idea behind it is if someone goes in and modifies that file, it would create, even by just changing a single element, it would create a whole new hash. So we would know, we're really starting to see hashes used more in downloading software from the web. They'll say, okay, here's the download site. We'll give you the hash, you download the program, you run it through, a hash generator, make sure you get the same hash code so that nobody's injected any malicious software into our software. So again, we have this hash. So the challenge with the hash can become, what if somebody goes in and modifies the file? But remember, we're saying based on that hash. So if somebody goes in and even modifies the file a little bit, the rule's not going to apply. We've denied everything that we're not creating allow rules for. So, then we review the rules. So, there's two rules. They're publisher rules. It's a rule on, 8 files, for example. So this created publisher rules. We go through and review the rules. Whoops. So we can create rules manually. So, another way to do it, start the wizard, create new rule, prompts you for, action, user group, conditions, exceptions. Again, the same thing that it's finding when it creates those automatic rules. So like I said, I'll give you some examples of this and show you how that might work. So this is the basic lecture. I hope you guys have a great day and you're progressing nicely in the class. Take care.